And boom, Dave Molyneux, that's you. I realize every time I do that, and I say Eric Anthony, that's me. Our names are above and below us, but people are listening, right?
Yeah, they are.
There's some people who aren't watching.
For some reason, people are listening. Some people are watching. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly. So one way or the other, they're going to know who Wheeze is.
Probably with the names plastered on the screen as well.
It helps.
It does help.
But in case you're listening, just listening, why aren't you watching our television show? No, I'm kidding. Our YouTube channel or Twitch. Dave, how's it going? How's your week been?
Okay, man. Not bad. Yes. Some potentially exciting news, but we'll maybe get into that in another episode because I haven't even talked to you about it yet.
Yeah. It's exciting for me, too.
There's exciting news coming. But yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? You good?
I'm good. Yeah, it was a nice weekend I just came off of. Officially 1 year away from being 40.
1 year
Crazy.
away. When was it your birthday?
Monday.
God damn it!
Today's Wednesday that we're recording this. But yeah, Monday was my 39th.
Well, happy birthday for Monday, dude. I missed it again.
Who cares? I don't care.
Me.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. When people just say, whether it's a week after New Year's or whatever, it's the thought that counts.
Right.
I'm not really...
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Hope you had a wonderful time. Congratulations.
It was a quiet day of podcasting with my other podcast partner, Lady J. So I have to... these episodes, there's all kinds of podcasts for people to listen to on Omniverse and Cave of Solitude. It's all good.
Yeah.
And,
it is all good. Plus, we've got, on top of the regular episodes with us, we do have a little bonus episode this week.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure when we're going to launch it just yet, but it's exciting stuff. It's a slightly different spin on things. So, yeah, there's more. There's always more.
Yeah, why not? Why not try?
Yeah, who gives you more? We do. Every time. Come on.
This is getting creepy. More every time.
Every time. That was a very good accent. I did like that.
Yeah. Am I pretty good?
No.
Or was your
Am I going to do yours?
No. I don't know how when someone like myself would try to do an English accent, how it sounds to people from England, because we can tell when a person is putting on an American accent. We're like, yeah, that's pretty good. But we can also tell like you're working at it.
Yeah.
But I think yours is pretty good.
You think my English accent is good? Thank you.
Your American English accent.
I don't know. We'll see. See how it passes one day.
Your Sin City rant that you did one time on a previous episode on Cave of Solitude episodes, but you did a really good Sin City spoof.
I'd have to talk like that the entire time next time in America, just the whole time. Always talking shots, and I'm not gonna be able to do it now because I'm thinking about it. So, should we talk about what we're going to talk about tonight?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into it. So I came up with the idea of doing guilty pleasures this week. You usually come up with a real good top 10 stuff, but so let's try and do something kind of quirky. Mm-hmm. But how do you think of, when you think of guilty pleasures, are they things that are just unconventional? Are they somewhat hidden gems, or are they kind of like, that's not that good, but I like it?
Well, that's
like,
it's probably more that, because I think like we've done hidden gems, and I think we could do hidden gems infinitely, because that's good stuff is good that no one's talking about. With guilty pleasures, in my mind, it's the stuff that you do really like, but you can't necessarily recommend. So, because I was talking to a friend of mine, Bob Fat Don Dons, and he was saying there should be no such thing as a guilty pleasure. You either like something or you don't. So, yeah, I kind of agree, because we were talking about films and stuff. So, like, Indiana Jones is like a guilty pleasure. You went like, are you ashamed of it then? No. So, in my mind, it's like there's stuff you like, but yeah, you wouldn't necessarily go out there going, you need to get on this. So technically what we've set up here from my perspective is an episode of 5 things you shouldn't read.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
No, I see your point, because that was what I was thinking of. I'm like, what should it be? Should it be the things that I'm embarrassed that I like? Or is it kind of those forgotten things or things that people wouldn't think to recommend? Like, you like that? Like, oh, you like that? It more of a... I was reading different lists that people had listed as like what their guilty pleasures are, to get an idea of where people get on that sort of... And so a lot of it was to your take on it. It's like, you know what? I know this isn't great, but I like it. But then some people were listing things where it's like, hey, like, that's a guilty pleasure? Because I'm pretty sure that people can all recognize that, hey, that's pretty good. But I think I noticed time kind of changes the way we look back on things.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain decades we go through where suddenly that the book that was the best book of this decade, people are like, you know, it wasn't that good. Like, that becomes the decade of yeah, and then it comes around again.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I was thinking of books, and some of the books I picked, I would recommend.
You would,
just because they could kind of second in some ways, not all of them. They could kind of second for hidden gem picks.
Okay.
For me.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
And I picked some stuff that I know you hate.
Oh, good. Oh, that's lovely. I think there'll be some things in there I don't know what you'll think, to be honest. I'm not even sure if you will have read any of it, so I don't know. It'd be interesting.
I wonder how... I don't know if I'd be able to list, like, comics that I absolutely despise. I'm not sure if I could.
Well, that's not a pleasure, is it?
No, but I know
it's like listing tonsillitis.
But some people are able to unequivocally say, like, I don't like it. I don't like it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess that's a good thing, to be a little bit more generous in the review department. I don't know. I prefer your style because it's real. I'm more like, yeah, it's good. You give me the honest truth. Like, no.
That's shit.
Better.
If seeing as it's your choice, do you want to kick us off?
Okay.
So
I did a theme this time.
Oh.
I went all DC.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm wearing shout out to Mike Del Mundo. I made a sweater of his variant hip hop cover.
No way.
Is
I
it
can
on
see it. It's on screen now. No, a bit to the left. Yes.
Okay. Shout out to Mike Del Mundo. He was our number one comic book artist pick, right? When we did our...
That's a sore point, and you know it.
What?
That was the one where I was going to choose him as my number one, and then you went, oh, by the way, shout out to Mike Del Mundo. And I was like, dude, he was my number one.
But you want to know what? I think it was cool that we were able to celebrate it even more.
Yeah.
The episode.
Yeah.
And he ended up listening to it, so shout out to him if he happens to be watching this. But I'm wearing a Spider-Man sweater, but I'm only going to talk about DC today.
Oh, conflicted.
Yeah. I'm inclusive.
Ooh. Is that what that is?
No, I don't. I like it. Did you have a theme of how you picked your guilty pleasures?
Yeah, I went for 5 guilty pleasures.
Shut up. Shut up. Okay.
So, and before Reed says, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you, Reed Reeds. Thank you. And before I make my first pick, got to send a shout out to our producer. Misha, thank you so much for everything you do behind the scenes. Couldn't do it without you.
Thank you.
Now, my first pick. We can show our books now, which is great. We used to show each other.
Yes.
It was just awesome. Now we can share with the audience. My first pick, none of these are in an order of like number one, but this is my Orion Omnibus by Walt Simonson. I didn't pick it to spite you, Dave.
Honest.
I recommended it to you because it was a guilty pleasure of mine. I think it's like it's a follow-up to the John Byrne Fourth World series he did, which I think ran about 20 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of convoluted. It was fun at times, but I didn't feel like I didn't know where it was going so much. Whereas with this story, it's a little bit simpler, but it's just a showdown between Orion and his father.
Yeah.
And what would happen if Orion took the place of Darkseid.
Right.
And all the things that ensue. So I'm a bit of a sucker for that Kirby universe kind of stuff where it's just wacky and big and mythological. And I'm a bit of a sucker for the fourth world.
Yeah.
I don't know much of it that I love.
Uh-huh.
But I like all the characters when I see them. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, what is that? How does that work? Because I'm exactly the same. Like, I don't feel I know much about them. I've read chunks. I love Mr. Miracle. I love the whole look of Mr. Miracle and everything. But yeah, there's something intriguing about them.
Totally. I love I like the Death of the New Gods storyline from Jim Starlin. That was like a prelude to Final Crisis. I mean, that was almost on my list for guilty pleasures because it wasn't anything to write home about, but it was just fun classic comics. Yeah, that one. Just fun. So yes, this series from Walt Simonson. I'm a big fan of Walt Simonson. Thor is one of my favorite comics. His run of Thor I talk about all the time. Shane, my buddy Shane, always makes fun of me for stop talking about Thor all the time. Like talk about like cool stuff. But yeah, I love Walt Simonson's stuff. He's one of those artists I think we mentioned recently where I pretty much want to, whenever he draws something, I want to see his interpretation of it. I'm just a big fan of his stuff. I like his writing. I like his. This to me was kind of like if you liked his Thor, you might like this. Not that it's the same, but it's that sort of big, epic, cosmic story of a father and son kind of working it out or fighting it out.
Yeah, I guess.
And go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say. I guess it does have those kind of a few parallels there, doesn't it? It's the godliness, the father-son stuff. Although I guess Odin was kind of missing from a lot of the Thor Simonson run.
That's right.
So I guess it's maybe like the chance he didn't really get to have with that stuff. He's kind of put it into this one, but a very different dynamic, obviously, because of who Darkseid is compared to who Odin is. But
exactly. So it's people always said it was Jack Kirby wanted to continue telling his Thor story, but he brought it to DC and made it the fourth world and Apocalypse. I don't know if I'm quoting that correctly, but I always liked kind of the parallels of those worlds that he's built. And just on a brief tangent, I enjoy watching the artists who were heavily inspired by Jack Kirby. That you can see how much of Kirby they put in their stuff, but it's so uniquely their own, like John Byrne or Walt Simonson or...
have you seen Jose Ladron?
Pardon me?
Jose Ladron.
No.
He did Cable in like the late 90s. He did an Inhumans miniseries. It's very Kirby, but it's still him. It's very heavily Kirby, even compared to like those people. It's really heavily Kirby, but he's still got his own vibe.
Yeah, it's just there's something about seeing the sons of certain artists like who follow in that tradition. It's like we often talk about Ivan Reis and Paul Pelletier and certain people that you can see they came from the Alan Davis, Neil Adams sort of way of drawing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's always fun to see how that gene carries on in artists and how when they pick up on someone else's creation, almost paying homage. It's like, okay, well, how did they do it?
Yeah.
Let's see how they pulled it off. So that's a guilty pleasure of mine. It's one of those on my list that I don't remember the story fully, but I want to go back and read it and see if I liked it as much as I remember I did.
Do you know, funny enough, it crosses my mind sometimes. I think it popped up recently in my head, and I thought, I'm slightly regretting getting rid of that book now. It's probably on the DC Infinite, whatever it's called, the digital app. So I might give it a look on there, but I didn't finish it in the end. And I think I wanted it to be like DC's version of his Thor run, but it's a lot heavier, isn't it? It's a lot grittier.
Yes.
It's not funny. It's not like got that quirky funny thing that Simonson has on his Thor run. And it shouldn't necessarily. Why bother doing the same thing again? That would be pointless. But I think a part of me, having just read it not that long ago, wanted more of the same. So I think that's probably the mindset I was in.
Yeah, I think that's a real thing of going into something with expectations.
Yeah.
And when you realize, like, oh no, this isn't where I thought I was going, it doesn't. It kind of can skew your interaction with it because you're not taking it for what it is. You're judging it of what you wanted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's still out there to get. It's usually a discounted omnibus when you order online.
Oh.
They have it in the trades, 2 trades that does the trick as well.
Yeah.
So if you want a fun little cosmic read of the new gods in DC, you can't go wrong with Walt Simonson giving it a go. That's my first pick.
True. Nice. Thanks, dude. I'm going to horrify you with my first pick. It's Secret Wars 2. I tell you what, though. What? Yeah. Go on.
I thought in my head, he's going to put Secret Wars 2 on there.
Here's the thing, right? This is my childhood. This is a big chunk of my childhood. So my first dip into the Marvel Universe was Secret Wars. Well, it was issue 8 of Marvel UK Secret Wars with Galactus on the cover with jazz hands. I'm sure that's what he does whenever he lands on a planet. But yeah, that was my Leo Sayer impression. That probably doesn't mean anything to anyone. But basically, they chopped it up into something like 31 issues, I think, with Secret Wars in Marvel UK, with backup stories with Alpha Flight and other stuff like that. So issue 32 of Secret Wars became Secret Wars 2. So it was done a little bit differently when it was reprinted over here. But I was so excited to see what would happen when the Beyonder, who's this godlike, well, he virtually is a godly being, coming to Earth. He made Battle World, made the heroes get on there and fight, offers them everything. Doom's stolen his powers, and then he comes back and steals it back from Doom. That's Secret Wars done. We'll never hear from it again. No, wait a minute. He's coming to Earth and he looks like Michael Jackson. So yeah, it's
that Barry Crow was
weird. But that's the thing. It's not something I could necessarily recommend. It is a big piece of my childhood. Like when they ran Secret Wars 2, so it's a 9-issue mini, but there were also the odd tie-in in like Avengers and Doctor Strange, the Spider-Man titles that were out obviously at the time, which was the mid-1980s. So rather than it be like an event the way events normally work these days, where like with Civil War, this is the start of Civil War, there's a whole storyline, this is a period of time, lots of things are tying in and taking place around the same time, and then it's kind of finished. With Secret Wars 2, it's sort of just happening alongside all the stuff that's in the Marvel Universe. So it takes place over what I guess would be several months.
Yeah.
And he's just
had that little corner banner for months. Like every book had it.
Pretty much every ongoing title, even like Micronauts, had it. He appeared in ROM. It was everything. Every ongoing series that I can think off the top of my head had the Beyonder in it at some point. So he comes to Earth. He decides he's going to experience desire because that was the whole point of him bringing people to the planet he made. And rather than offer them something so he can understand what desire is by watching them, he decides to experience it himself. It's terrible in every conceivable way. But I read it a little while ago when I did a Marvel Comics Guide post on it, which we're going to transfer over, but it's still really bad. But like even reading it again, it sort of evokes all those feelings a bit of that excitement of like, who's that? These are the X-Men? Who's this one from the X-Men with all the crazy stuff going on with her face, which was Rachel Summers as Phoenix. So you got little snippets of all these characters, because basically it was like going into a comic shop and only picking up the Secret Wars tie-ins and leaving with nothing else. Like with the odd exception of a bit more of the John Byrne Fantastic Four run and a bit more of the Avengers Roger Stern run, and the Ironmonger storyline was featured in it, even though it wasn't a Secret Wars story. So they threw extra stuff in, but for the most part, it was just Secret Wars 2. And yeah, it's just really weird. And you kind of wonder who the hell thought it was a good idea. And it was Jim Shooter, basically, who was editor-in-chief at the time. This was his baby, for want of a better term. And because he was in charge, he could just do it. So they had their big event, and rather than just go, maybe we can have a different event this year, because that was popular, we'll do Secret Wars 2 on the nose, and we'll make this alien being come to Earth and basically dress as Jacko. He had the shoulder pads, he had the curly hair.
It is such of the time.
It's really of the time.
Being of the right age where my older cousin, shout out to my cousin Luke, who's the guy who got me who made me realize, like, this is where the superheroes really exist.
Yeah.
He had a couple of issues of Secret Wars too, and I always just loved looking at the cover of I don't know which issue it was, but it was like the Beyonder, like punching a building, and everyone's just hanging on.
Yeah,
trap.
I think that's about number 8 or something. Because we didn't have that cover in our version, so I didn't see that till way later.
I don't remember the exact number, but I just remember seeing Secret Wars too, like that symbol everywhere.
Yeah,
just knowing like this is important.
Little did you know.
Little did I know. It's not.
It's not important. Forget it.
You know, I did like some of the times it was tied in to like an ongoing book, like Amazing Spider-Man or whatever. It was just, at times it was a cool little MacGuffin to tell a little side story that was a little quirky. So I like that aspect of it.
Yes.
But I've never read the main story.
Yeah, don't. The best one of those tie-ins is the John Byrne issue with the little kid who's a massive Human Torch fan. And this guy says to him, like, he's helping this guy out who's made a model plane on the roof of this building, and he says, if you can do me a favor and just lock up these cans and bits in my garage, I've got to go and put this plane away. Be careful with that fuel can. You don't want to turn yourself into another Human Torch. And he's like silhouetted, and it jumps in time then, and it's all about how the Human Torch deals with the fallout of what actually happens in the story. And it's like, it was heavy stuff. Like, as a kid, like, it really got to me, that story. So there's some major stuff in there in terms of those tie-ins, and like, there is fallout from this. The New Mutants don't make it through unscathed, weirdly. Stuff like that. I mean, and like Phoenix showing a much darker, more murderous side comes from Secret Wars 2 tie-ins, because she decides she's going to kill him. And that leads in then to all the Mutant Massacre stuff and how she behaves just before Mutant Massacre. So it does have impact. It's just the main series is terrible. I can't express it enough. Well, it's Al Milgrom. We've talked about Al Milgrom, and even though he's a lovely guy, and I don't want to be knobby about someone's artwork, no one sets out to do bad work. It doesn't look good. It's not a good-looking series, and it's a very odd topic. I mean, there are points in it as well where, like, the Beyonder deals with depression. He decides, and another issue where he goes, like, I've decided I'm in love with Dazzler. You're kind of like, what is going on here? It's just so weird. But I have a real soft spot for it.
The Beyonder is such a weird character.
He should have stayed in the Battle World thing and then never come back.
Yeah, it should have been left alone as almost like an Elseworld story. Because it's one of those characters where, like you said, he's so godlike and omnipotent, and like, how do you stop him? How do you beat him? What's the point?
Yeah.
What kind of a villain is this?
Well,
it just doesn't, like, it's just weird.
It's very weird. I mean, in theory, it's dealt with at the end of this storyline, but people keep bringing him back, and because clearly this has fond memories for certain people of a certain generation, and there are people out there, like we were talking to Nick from Geekable the other week. I've had whole conversations with him about the Beyonder. He loves all that. He loves it. Like, why? It's not even his childhood. It might be his childhood, because I guess he found a lot of older comics when he was younger. But it's weird. But then I am sat here knowing full well that I intend to read Secret Wars 2 again before I die. So there we go. That's my pick.
Shout out to my pal Adam Chapman. He's got a soft spot for it too.
Has he? Good lad. He said
it's the one omnibus he'll never give up because it was his first omnibus.
And
I
my
said,
second.
but I said, it's trash. Get rid of it. And he's like, nope, never. I got a soft spot for it.
Yep.
I said, all right.
Good on him. He's right. He's right to keep it, but it is terrible.
I want to read it just to see the hype of the terrible. Is that weird?
No, honestly, when we're going to get it on the site soon, read it with the tie-ins. If you read it with the tie-ins, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense anyway, but it makes less sense if you read it without the tie-ins.
I love your excitement and then your distaste of your.
It's such a weird thing. It's like dressing up a poo in a cuddly costume, and you want to kind of cuddle it, but you know that it's poo.
It's poo.
What a great analogy that was.
Yeah. Okay, so my first one. All right, I know what I'm doing. My next, I think me and you both expressed that we enjoyed this book. I could be wrong. Trying to think of the era that it would be in. It was in the last decade, in the aughts, from DC.
Okay.
It was Justice League of America.
Okay.
Series. 9 issues. It got delayed, and I think it lost its steam. But it's collected, and I got a soft spot for it. From Brian Hitch.
That's good.
JLA. Power and Glory.
Yeah. Well,
I like it.
It's good. That earned him the run on the series, on the ongoing series. But
Which wasn't good.
it wasn't. No, I just dropped that. But that was good. That was a good series. What's it? Gods and Monsters.
Power and Glory.
Power and Glory. Sorry, yeah.
And it's how can I put it without spoiling it? So spoilers first, but it's revolves around Superman and Krypton, and you often, if you've ever read Superman, you often hear the Kryptonian god Ra.
Yes.
Is often referred to. And what if he was real? And what if he came to Earth with a plan? How would it unfold? And it's quite the conspiracy, and it's got a little bit of everything in it. It's Brian Hitch, so it's very cinematic. You feel like this could definitely be a movie. I'm a sucker for Brian Hitch stuff. I'm reading The Authority right now for the first time.
Oh, cool.
I just like his stuff.
Me too.
I can't help it. It's just
You don't have to apologize for that.
no. It's just one of those things where I feel like I'm watching a movie when I flip his pages, but it's better.
Yeah.
These special effects are like incredible.
His what?
The special effects from his pages are more incredible than what you would see on a screen. Like, I feel more impressed by that.
Yeah, likewise. I think because I think the run on the Authority earned him the run on Ultimates, which then I think earned him essentially a run on a book like this JLA book. Funny enough, I have a guilty pleasure thing. I'm not going to mention this time around that he also draws, but it's him at his earliest. And I still love it. But that's when he openly says, I was trying to draw like Alan Davis. So he came from like a school of trying to draw like Alan Davis to having a pretty different style, and it just being so cinematic.
Yeah. I feel like I was thinking about this today, reading The Authority, and not that they're comparable, but more in the artists who capture that cinematic feel.
Yeah.
And Brian Hitch, J.H. Williams, and John Cassaday. There's just something about when they put a page together, you want to just take in everything that was, and it's almost drawn in a way where you can't help but follow it correctly.
Yeah, in quite different ways.
Yeah,
between the three artists, but yes.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good comparison, because they're all completely unique and significantly different from each other. You can tell them apart right away, but it's got that same sort of experience that you get with them.
Yes,
a movie folding as you flip pages.
Yeah.
So yeah, JLA Power and Glory. I think it's not something any people really talk about. It had a delay. It kind of lost steam. I think it was outside of, like, it was within the New 52 Justice League continuity, but this story felt bigger than anything that was happening. So you didn't know really where to put it, how to feel about it. Like, what is this what is this? But it was quite. I think it's a bit of a hidden gem, but it's definitely a guilty pleasure for me.
Cool. That's a good choice. It's a good choice. Incidentally, in terms of knowing where it sits, that will make sense when I do the reading order.
Yeah.
Woo! I can do that now.
Plug.
Okay. I'm going to take myself into a completely different comfort zone now with my next choice. I've mentioned it before. I don't know what I was going to include. I wanted to include it on something at some point, on some list that we do, but I don't know where it belongs. And in terms of fitting, what in my mind is, I love it, but I don't know if I can recommend it. Sorry about that. It's got a tickle. It's. I don't read much manga.
Okay.
But I read. I'm saying manga and Gantz. It's probably manga and Gantz. But I'm English, so hello.
Okay. You gave it both a fair shot, and that's what matters.
Thank you. These are hefty volumes. Look, they're chunkers. But they're about to release issue 12 of volume 12 of this in a couple of months, and that will mark the end of this run.
Okay.
But I don't read much manga stuff, and this just got me. I think so. It's a weird concept. I may have mentioned the concept before in here, but just to sum up once again, it's about. I mean, when it follows the initial characters, like there's a kid, is it like a teenager? He's killed by a train, I think, and then he's suddenly kind of faxed in to this room in this apartment in Japan, because it's in Japan anyway, and he's suddenly he comes into existence again in this room, and all these other people who just recently died, they start appearing, or is that more upwards because they're like kneeling or stood or whatever, hello, and they all appear in this room, and then this ball basically says to them I don't know if it speaks or if it's just written. I'm trying to remember now. You think I'd know? I've read quite a lot of this, but it basically says to them, we're going to send you out to kill aliens. This is all the stuff you've got, and there's a load of like black costumes with these weird dials and stuff on, and they get loads of cool weapons, and eventually they get like vehicles as well, but one of them is like a big wheel, and you sit in the wheel, and it's got all these guns, and they're just fighting these aliens that get increasingly weirder as the story goes on, and you're trying to figure out what the hell the mystery is. What is Gantz? But then just as you think you're kind of building up towards that, a whole second element to the story comes in, which has nothing to... And it's all about how people are playing with the idea that they're kind of dead already, or maybe they can't die, and then it just goes absolutely just batshit crazy. And I can't tell you why. Some of it is just... There is filth in this. Like, the guy that writes and draws it, he loves a lot of nudity, and there is some freaky nudity in here. But yeah, he has his predilection
for the 18 plus.
It's an 18 plus book for sure. People doing things with aliens at one point as well that you don't. I was reading it on a train. I'm never reading it on a train again. I tell you what, though, I got the carriage to myself. So I love it, but it weirds me out that I love it, and I think there must be something hideously wrong with me, and that's why it's a guilty pleasure.
It's funny you put it that way, because I was thinking about putting Preacher on my list, because every time I read it, like, what is that? I just finished the Quinn Cannon.
Oh my god, that's my favorite storyline.
Is it?
Yes, it's wrong.
So, Sheriff Jesse Custer.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's like a old-fashioned Western. There's this charm to the book, and the rough and very visceral world, where I know I'm on a tangent about Preacher, but it's like you feel guilty sometimes, like, holy, whoa, this is wild stuff. But yeah.
I've had people sat next to me while I was reading Preacher. I was at work reading Preacher. I purposely sat in a corner, and I was so engrossed in it. And it was, I don't want to spoil the bit, but it's a pretty graphic scene in it. Subtle, but graphic. And someone sat next to me, and they just went, seriously, what the fuck, Dave? I can explain.
Yeah, there's times where I'm reading it, and my wife is, maybe preparing dinner, and I'm just in the dining room reading, not too far away, and I'm just like, oh. Okay. Yeah, it's something else.
Well, this is that turned up to 45.
Seriously.
Some of it you're going, what am I? I was walking back from the train station, couldn't put it down, like still reading it, walking down the path, totally engrossed. I have to know where this goes, and I'm literally reading it, walking down the street, going, what? Why are you doing this to me? It's really odd. I can't explain it. It's literally 12 volumes that size. It'll be by the end, but I mean, I think I'm up to 7 or 8. So I haven't finished it, but I love it, and I'm going to hell. So, what's your next choice, dude?
All right, sticking with the theme, I'm going to go with a book that I had originally read in omnibus form, and then I thought, I'll probably never read that again, so I traded it in or sold it, and I regretted it. And I'll be honest, a lot of it had to do with the experience of reading the book, because it was an early DC omnibus printing where it was like a total trap.
Oh.
It was a pain to keep it open, and you actually did lose a lot of the art from Gutter Loss.
Mm-hmm.
But it was repurposed in trades, and I found them for really cheap at Comic Cons, like bargain bin cheap. And I'm like, why? Why is it so cheap? But I took them. There's Hawkman from Jeff Johns.
I still haven't read that. I've got the omnibus, funnily enough, which I'm now worried about my fingers when I read. But
I don't know how long ago you got it, but I know they've reprinted it. I've had mine. The one that I had was a long time ago.
I think I've got a reprint.
Yeah. Mine is, I think, an original. It was one of those things in my comic book shop shelf that wasn't ever being sold, and I picked it up on one of those really good sale sort of weekend things. But yeah, it was most likely the original printing. But I don't want to spoil anything for you, but it's all Rags Morales art, real bright, real superhero swashbuckling sort of stuff. You can see it.
Just about. I don't know which way to point you. Yes, that's it. That's Rags Morales stuff?
Pretty. I think this is Rags Morales, and it's not a Rags Morales page.
Is it not?
It is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, it's quite hard to tell.
Yeah, and it's Hawkman is one of those characters where I feel people like the look of it, but it's a very difficult character to know where to begin reading. It's so convoluted.
Yeah, it's a weird look as well, though. I think it could be one of those looks that can either put you off or pull you in.
Yeah.
And I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm like, I kind of want to read this, but I'd probably read it on my own, because I don't want someone to see me going, what's that now? You've already been looking at freaky Japanese pseudo-porn. Now you're reading some dude dressed as a bird? What's wrong with you?
I think the Birdman in the comic book world is, I think, a little bit more normal than aliens getting pounded.
Say that.
But yeah, the 25 issues, I think it's story and plotted. I'm not sure exactly how, but it's often credited as Jeff Johns, but James Robinson is also, I think, part of the story.
It overlaps with JSA, right?
It overlaps with JSA, and there's like a whole storyline in the JSA run where Hawkman comes back, and then he gets his own solo series. And I think it's a really strong run. It's a lot of fun. It makes use of all of the different origins of Carter Hall or Qatar Hall, depending on, and he finds a way to meld the future sort of technocratic version of Hawkman, and Thanagar, and then mixing it with the Egyptian mythological lore. And it's like a bit Indiana Jones mixed with high adventure.
It was like that so it was a tidy up to a degree, but with a coherent story, but years before the more recent one, right?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because
I feel like this is Jeff Johns.
2003-ish?
Yeah, I think around there, early to mid 2000s.
Right.
Definitely before Infinite Crisis.
Right. Did
So
they follow it up with Hawkwoman? So like number 26 became Hawkwoman or something, I think.
I don't know.
But I think they need to collect. This is the stuff they need to. Some of those series, like they've never finished collecting in trades.
No. Yeah, it's weird how they kind of they start up and then they just orphan the line, and it's like people are not going to want to invest in a Kyle Rayner Green Lantern series if they don't think you're going to print volume 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the reason we're not buying volume 1, because we feel we're only going to get volume. It's a stupid thing. Everyone buys volume 1, you'll get volume 2, but we feel like you're not gonna go all the way with it.
I see so many people make that comment whenever DC release a new book. They're going like, yeah, but are we going to even get a second volume? I'll wait till there's a volume 2. And then they don't release the volume 2 because no one bought it because they're waiting for the volume 2.
Yeah, that's me. It's like, I'm not going to be stuck with the first half of this and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you print it again and I've got to rebuy it so my shelf looks nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh. But this is, again, another one of those, similar to the Walt Simonson, same kind of page count, 2 volumes, collects all 25, 26 issues, and you get a nice full story. And if you like Hawkman and you're just kind of like, I kind of think it's cool, but I don't know where to begin, try this one out.
Cool.
Highly recommend. Yeah.
That's good.
It's fun. A lot of fun.
Okay.
Dave?
Is it me?
It's you.
This won't shock you. Or will it?
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just going to get straight into it. No build-up.
No build-up.
Acts of Vengeance. Acts of Vengeance is a crossover event from 1989. 1990. It kind of like tipped over the Christmas period from that year when I was, God, how old? Probably 2 when I was buying that. So it's basically, when I started buying American comics after the whole Secret Wars 2 thing, and I didn't think you could get American comics in England, I walked into a newsagent and I picked up about 20 comics. And then about a few months later, so that was just after Inferno, so I think about 6 months later, or maybe more, I experienced my first actual crossover event, and this took my proper crossover cherry. It's basically a story, because I think the past three events, so I had Secret Wars as their first big event, then Secret Wars 2, Mutant Massacre, which revolved around the X-Men, Fall of the Mutants, which revolved around the X-Men, Inferno, which revolved around the X-Men, and then this time around they went, do you know what, we're going to do an Avengers thing. Let's do an Avengers thing. So there's a guy who's gathered the major villains being Kingpin, Magneto, Doctor Doom, Mandarin, the Wizard. Really? the Wizard? I never understood that. And someone else now who I now can't remember. For shame. And they're the prime movers, and then they get them to switch their villains. They basically go like, so we're going to kill this guy now, and we're going to, instead of fighting the same people, we'll just send a new person to go kill them for no reason at all, other than that's the deal. So of course, it doesn't pan out because they've all fought their own villains once at some point and beaten them. Yeah. Why didn't they just mob them together? Which is essentially what ends up being the premise of spoilers of Old Man Logan, essentially.
Right.
To a degree. Anyway, and they use a similar idea down the line in Dark Reign, where Norman Osborn gathers his own band of key villains or key players, and then promotes all these villains to kind of heroic roles. It's a similar thing, but anyway, the Acts of Vengeance did it first. But the idea was that the main targets of this whole scheme are the Avengers, and at the time it was John Byrne writing both titles. So he was writing Avengers. It was drawn by Paul Ryan, I think, and he was writing and drawing Avengers West Coast, where Scarlet Witch was having a massive breakdown after losing her kids, and the Vision going full white. So they were the focus, but it seemed to be, because it like affected pretty much every title, and it predominantly, because there's so many Spider-Man titles, and he was going through he ended up accidentally having cosmic powers, and they're going, now we want to not kill him but take his cosmic powers. And it's incredibly messy, the whole thing, really.
It was never an Acts of Vengeance series.
No,
it was just tie-ins.
Yeah, so basically the main titles, which are all the Avengers books, including Quasar and Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, they had the big Acts of Vengeance banner across the top. Whereas the X-Men series, Uncanny X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, all these other books had just a little corner thing. So like, these are just tie-in books. They're not really the main story. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I was 12, 13, I think at the time. Spoilers. And then basically, I didn't notice. I just go like, that's an Acts of Vengeance one, I'm having it. That's an Acts of Vengeance one, I'm having that as well. That as well. I'm just having it all. And got everything. And I loved it. But it's completely nonsensical. I think that like Fantastic Four ties is one of the main tie-ins, but all their storyline is they go to Washington to try and convince them not to have a Superhuman Registration Act, which of course is the reason why when they run that, not to get into it too much, but when they run that storyline in Civil War, and Mr. Fantastic gives like a deep-seated reason as to why he supports the Registration Act, it doesn't make sense because he'd already opposed it in Acts of Vengeance.
Yeah.
Oh well, who's counting, right? It's bollocks. But I love it.
But I think you say it's bollocks, and that's fine, bollocks. But
it's bollocks. It's bollocks, David.
But it's those things. It's stories like that for a person your age at the time was perfect for you to see how the entire universe was connected.
Yeah.
And it worked. In that regard, it was a success.
Completely.
Maybe it's not. Well, maybe it's silly. Maybe the plot is like, oh boy, it's Saturday morning cartoon. Like, don't get me wrong. Tangent. Me and my wife have been watching the Justice League animated series.
We go to sleep never at night. Seen it.
It's a ton of fun, and you find yourself engrossed in the story. That's my word for the day. Like, you just like, oh man, I want to know what happens. But there's plenty of times where you're watching it as a person who's read comics and read the Justice League and all that kind of stuff, where you're just like, really? Why are they in a plane? All of them can fly. Like, why are they saying Mayday, Mayday? Every single character, one of them has wings. Like, crashing is not a problem, but you find yourself still engaged in the story, right? So. Yeah. If the magic trick is done, that's all that matters.
Yeah, it is all that matters. Plus, in those X-Men issues, you get Jim Lee introducing Psylocke as the Psylocke we knew for a long, long time, which has since been undone. But that was the story that introduced her as Lady Mandarin. So, and that was like, when I was reading that was so cool. And then Wolverine fights the Mandarin in that weird blue and white. I'm excited now just thinking about it. Not, aroused. I just mean like, it was so cool. I just thought it was so cool as a kid, especially that cover with him slashing up the Mandarin's armor, and plus there was finally got to a point where they have a proper confrontation of sorts between the Red Skull, so like a Nazi villain, and Magneto, who suffered considerably at the hands of the Nazis. And it doesn't necessarily go the way you think it's going to go, but they're essentially on the same team. And you're going like, this wouldn't happen. He wouldn't be on the same team. And they address it. So there are some key bits in it, but there's also a fair amount of ballbacks.
But that's comics.
Yes, that is comics. Well, that's all. It's mainstream comics, isn't it? It's superhero comics. Yeah. There's a good helping of utter silliness, and that's part of the reason why we love it.
Yeah, and I mean, I have that like we've often talked about because of the whole crossover and the connection made because of all of that. There's a double-edged sword to the crossovers and big events in comics, because it makes you suddenly pick up a book or be interested in a creator that you would have never checked out otherwise.
Yeah.
And then there's that other part review where you become resentful because you bought a book. It was like, I didn't want to ever read that book, but you forced me to in order for me to be a completist or for me to see what's happening in the story.
Yeah.
So it's the double, like, all of this cool stuff, and then it's like, oh man, that sucked.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of the point, isn't it, as well? Like, they do use it as a sales gimmick, and it does pay off. Oh, and shit, the New Warriors made their first appearance in Acts of Vengeance.
Very cool. That's big. Yeah. That's really big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I don't think it's anything. I mean, I get why you feel it's a guilty pleasure, but it's good. It's got some good stuff.
Overall, it's not what I would give a high rating to. Would I read it again now if you said you've got to read this again? I go like, sure, yeah, all right, because it's just stupid fun.
Yeah, that's what matters. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Good pick. I like it.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna go with one of my favorite characters, the Big S, the Big Cheese, the Boy Scout. I've got a lot of guilty pleasures that are Superman related. I could do a whole episode.
I thought he'd come up earlier.
But this time it's going to be Grant Morrison, his Superman run.
Would you give that the guilty pleasure stamp?
It's not because I'm embarrassed I like it, but I know that I'm not in a majority of people who would refer to this run.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you like that, huh? And
yeah.
I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, having been very dismissive of it in the past. Like, it was just, couldn't be bothered, didn't make sense why they even went along with it. I felt it was like the problem with Superman in the New 52 was all because of this run. And then I read it in its completion, and I years after the fact, I'm like, oh, I see what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he made a lot of elements of the New 52 make sense for that Superman and the world he would exist in. And it also kind of felt like his attempt at writing, if All-Star Superman is his Dark Knight Returns, then this would be his year one. It's that character. This is the Superman that would probably end up at All-Star Superman. That's what it felt like.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I think he kind of does that with, it's almost a trilogy in a weird way.
Yes.
So between that run, which came last, like if you treat it as that one, and then DC 1 million in a weird way, it's referenced a lot, and then All-Star Superman, it gives this, no, or maybe it's the other way around, it's All-Star Superman and then DC 1 million. So it's actually, it was told in reverse. They tie together. Like, in terms of what happens to Superman, it does all tie together. If you read them together, you go, wait a second, this is all connected. But he released them all backwards.
Yeah.
Essentially. That makes sense.
It makes sense now that you explain it. I never thought of it that way, or realized that all three of those connected. But I also realized in making this pick, I have a guilty pleasure for Rags Morales, apparently, because he's the main artist in this series.
Is he?
Yeah. He's the main collaborator.
Oh.
I have also some backup stories from... And this is what made this book get reprinted, because they didn't properly credit the backup writer.
Yes.
And I'm going to try to...
Charlie Fish, isn't it?
Charlie Fish,
yeah.
Max. You got Rags Morales, Andy Kubert, and Brad Walker.
Really?
Yes.
I don't remember. I need to read it again. I think that was one of the first Superman runs I read when I, stopped reading so much Marvel. When I stopped reading Marvel. Yeah, that was one of the first ones, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. So I want to read, and that was like 2016 when I read it, so I want to read it again.
Yeah, it's a really cool take on the character. You can see how it's like a nice refresh button that pays homage to all of the different eras of Superman in the Grant Morrison type of way that he's known to do. And he often asks like the big questions with characters like a Superman, like what does this character really mean in the whole storytelling universe, in the universe of imagination? What is Superman? So it's got a lot of meta elements as well, which I enjoy sometimes experiencing.
Yeah.
So it was a pleasant surprise, but I know that I might be in the minority of people who say like those are some pretty good comics. Like people should read that.
I think part of it is just that contempt for the New 52, and some of those
Definitely.
people probably never read it, and I think it's always important to try and not be one of those people that hates something without having read it, because I don't. I mean, you can say that doesn't appeal to me, thanks, but you can't say that it's crap if you've never actually tried it with an open mind.
That's the key, is that where you're coming from with it, right? If I try to read a new beginning of a universe or whatever the case, like, don't go in with all your baggage.
Mm-hmm.
You go in with all your baggage or what you want it to be, it's going to just bother you.
Yeah.
So I read it before. I read the first 8 issues of this series before, and I'm just like, I don't feel connected. I don't get it. And it wasn't until Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr. got on to Superman where I was kind of like, all right, like, let's do something. But this is actually good stuff.
Yeah.
Being removed from it and reading it, it's good stuff.
One of my highest rated issues of that New 52 era, and one of the ones that kept me in, was from that run. Yeah. And I think you know which one it is, right?
I think I know. Yeah, me too. Yeah. It was Superman and Crypto. Yeah. I mean, this is the sweetest.
I was so shocked at how good that was. It just,
The backup stories in these issues were quite good. I have to say. Yeah.
They're the Charlie Fish ones, right? Charlie Fish writes the backups.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of... I don't know. I think it's overlooked. I think it's an overlooked run.
Good shout. It's a good shout because it's got it in my head now, and I want to go read it again.
Oh, good. I'm going to make you read all these books you didn't even want to finish. Orion, like, oh.
Got 5 more things to deal with now. Okay. My only DC pick for the night is quite a big pick. So this is real guilty pleasure, I think, because in terms of it fitting my rule in my mind, it's a difficult one to recommend. And I think part of the reason why it's difficult to recommend is because the consistency of it really varies quite heavily. But I have a real soft spot for it. So, and it's New 52 era too as well. So, it's the top one. That's the top one. So it's Earth. Oh, jeez, Earth 2. From the New 52 era. So it was a weird.
Robinson?
It's James Robinson. Nicholas Scott is drawing the first volume as well. Whose artist? Oh, it's so good. She's so good. Because I think she was doing Nightwing for a bit as well. So like, her art is awesome, man. But yeah, so it's alongside. I think it was launched late into the New 52. It's when they started cancelling titles, and so they just relaunched their whole universe, and then alongside that, they relaunched a second universe, which is Earth 2, which was kind of more of an old school DC tradition.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to talk about it without spoiling a part of it straight away because it happens very, very early on and it's kind of the hook. But you've got your Trinity on the front there. They're not in it long. And a lot of it deals with the fallout of what happens to them. So that's what they ended up doing with, like, they had Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern. He is the Green Lantern of that universe. And there is another Batman, but it's not Bruce. And it's not who you think it's going to be either. So there's some really interesting ideas. Plus, for all those people that went, oh, it's just tick box. It's just a tick box exercise to have a black Superman in a story. It was happening in here. It was happening here already. So I know that it wasn't the first place where they had a black Superman, but he's a major character in here, and he's Zod, essentially. I think in it. I don't know if that's a spoiler because I'm trying to remember now. But yeah, so I mean, like it's 6 volumes, but as it gets towards volume 6, it turns into kind of a major event and ties into World's End, which as a companion series. That's a little bit messy, and that's where it's hard to recommend because you kind of have to read both.
I really want to read that. I've seen the trades, like haphazardly pieces of them at different times, and I've always like, I want volume 1 first, and anyways, I've never been able to get around to reading it. I want them to maybe make an omnibus of that. I'm not sure
That
why,
would be
but
cool.
I want to read it because I think it's one of those, again, like similar to the Superman from Grant Morrison. There's a lot of things that are included in there, again, like the president Superman, the black president Superman that exists. That's introduced in there as well.
Yes.
But there's these things that from the New 52 that sometimes it's just another book that they printed. It's like, yeah, whatever. It's inconsequential. But collected and read on its own for what it is, there's some stuff that we ignore.
Yeah.
That's probably better than what you think is the good thing right now. It's just that's the number one seller, and that's
exactly.
But this is actually good stuff that you're ignoring because it's Earth 2.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
Right?
Again, like, I know we mentioned that a few times. Like, it didn't happen, but like, it's all fiction. So if you've got a good storyline, then it's happened in your mind. Like that's what hooks you in. I mean, there's a few volumes of this as well that are written by Tom Taylor, and I think they're the stronger volumes. So, and then
6 volumes.
6 volumes with volumes 1 and 2 of Earth 2 World's End, but there are also, then it goes into Earth 2 The Society, which I've never read. I've never read it, but I intend to. I'm going to do a big read through. I'm going to do a proper reading order because there's a lot of other stuff that ties in that people don't know about. So I'm going to put that together, but I'm quite psyched to read it again because I just thought it was just a good standard, it's kind of a standalone sub-universe almost, though it does impact the main DCU. At a couple of stages.
I think that's the fun thing about those not underground because it's a DC book, but kind of like those cult following books where if you know about it, you'll be like, yeah, man, that's really good, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's those books that are pushed off to the side that are worthwhile to check out because the rules are kind of thrown out the window. It's like when you read Justice, you think it's a video game tie-in, but when you read it and you realize that Tom Taylor understands and respects the DC universe and history, but now he's moving with it in real time. Like, what if this happened? What if this was an event?
Yeah,
and things just went batshit crazy.
Well, they're not hampered by all, like you say. They're not hampered by all the rules. They're not going to go. You can't do that in this series. You can't because actually over in Detective Comics, this is happening to you can't do that. None of that goes on in these kind of side ones, and
fun things happen like that.
Yeah, and they're so they put a lot of heart and soul into them and length into them because length is important. They put that into these books. took a while there, mate. And that's like, you look at how epic Injustice is, and you look at how epic this is. There's real work going into making these universes work, but you don't have to buy 30 titles to appreciate it. Admittedly, there are tie-in books with that one to fully appreciate it, but I mean, even then, I don't think you have to read everything.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
I want to check that out.
Cool.
Thank you for putting that back out there.
Oh, no worries.
Hey, the omnibus makers, make one of those.
Give us Earth 2. Yes.
2 people will buy it.
Yeah, you'll sell 2 copies, maybe, if they don't release it at the same time as some other good stuff. That one.
My turn. Okay,
is this your last?
This is my last. We've talked about this recently. Sorry for getting off the mic. But we talked about this recently. I don't have my dust jacket, which feels weird, but it doesn't matter. This is my only absolute comic that I own. I don't buy many absolutes. It's usually I spend, the omnibus money, but this absolute I felt justified because it collects a story that I enjoy rereading from now and again, clearly with the bigger artwork, and I think the reason you want to have this is for the artwork.
Okay.
That is Hush.
Okay.
Batman Hush, one of the books that I got back in comics. It was a 2 graphic novel series that told this, I guess it's like a maxi series version, but in regular continuity, 12 issues.
12 issues, yeah.
Of what essentially could be a Batman movie, and elements have been included in certain movies. Mm-hmm. And it's the greatest hits of Batman and his villains. drawn by Jim Lee. The first time he's been, I don't know if this was his first time on a DC book or first time drawing a major character, but I mean, everybody's seen this picture, right?
Almost there. Yes, there he is.
Everybody's seen that before.
Yeah,
it's in this book.
Is it a cover or a page?
That's a cover. But the covers are iconic.
Yeah,
panels are iconic.
The Superman Batman moments.
Are
iconic.
The moments in this are really, really cool moments, artistically, and even, I mean, the outcome of the story is take your pick, but the way like the journey there's a lot of fun.
Cool.
There's a lot of fun. You've read?
I've read it, but like I read it 20 years ago, plus.
Okay.
So I can't remember. I was probably hammered at the time. I don't know. I literally feel like that was during my 20s. Oh dear God. And that's some of that's a bit hazy. So I think I liked it because I hung on to those books for a long time, and I actually also have the Absolute.
Yeah, I mean, they're all issues that the creators at the time, Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, they didn't want to make like a special miniseries. They wanted to put it into the regular ongoing monthly title, and they made a bet that Jim Lee couldn't do it. And
really?
Yeah. There's in one of the issues, if you look through your Absolute, when I think it's Lois is at the Daily Planet and she's in her little cubicle, there's all these Post-it notes around, and it says Mike Carlin owes me $100 or something like that. So it was Jim Lee's little tidbits of...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, stuff like that. Because he was obviously the best-selling comic book artist for an issue of all time, right?
Yeah.
But wasn't very prolific or being able to meet a schedule.
He's never been able to meet the schedule.
So that was a big thing with this book to prove that he could do like a whole year on time.
But never again.
Yeah. But I think for a person wanting to get into comics, it's a great entryway book.
Yeah.
If you peripherally like Batman or just a big fan of like the cartoon or the movies or the video games, if you like that and you want to get into Batman, this is going to be like a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you say, it's a greatest hits. Like there's tons of references to all the stuff you'd expect of Batman.
Yeah.
But they probably wouldn't do it in a film, at least they wouldn't have done, because they'd need so many kind of stars and budget. But it's cool. It's a nice looking book. That's as much as I remember. So I'm not going to say much more than that personally. But
yeah, no, I mean, I would love to see your reaction reading it again. My wife reads it every year or two.
Really?
She goes back to the shelf and she loves Batman, but she's reading it now, and she even has the coloring book.
What, Hush coloring book?
The Hush coloring book. It has like the first 6 issues.
Oh.
And she's just like, while she's relaxing sometimes, or we're just hanging out, she'll be like coloring. She's very, very neat, and like everything is so proper. It's like, wow, you should do comic book coloring. But she knows the book well. She's reading in the Absolute format, and she's kind of like, I think I agree with you and Dave when you're like, is it as good as we remember?
Oh no, we killed it for her.
But it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot
makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Nice.
You're one. Let's do it.
Okay, this is a bit tricky because I had right. When this is a childhood thing again, because this is, like with Secret Wars 2, this is probably the series that got me into comics. So right, when I was a kid, so in this country, comics for the most part, in most people's minds, you even mention comics now, people go, what, like the Beano and the Dandy? And they're these terrible, unfunny comic strips of like Dennis the Menace. We have a Dennis the Menace here, but he's like a bit naughty. He's a bit naughty, and then he gets caught, and then his dad hits him with a slipper, which he probably doesn't do anymore because that's child abuse. But that was what we had as why did we read that? Yeah, I read a lot about child abuse as a kid. These comics were horrible. They were just not entertaining it anyway. But I liked the idea of comics. I knew I liked the idea of comics, but I didn't have good comics. So I knew there was something resonating with me. And then I think I had the odd Marvel issue. I think I had to shade the Changing Man comic that my dad bought me, which is weird in hindsight because he was never a fan of the comic thing. So it was random American comics that I think they just got thrown away eventually. Ended up with Star Wars comics. They were awful. And then there was an advert in one issue of Star Wars, or Return of the Jedi as it was here, like a fortnightly series. And it was for a series about robots that turn into cars and beat each other up. And I'm like, how old was I? 8. I'm like, I have to get that. I have to get that thing. So I ended up getting it in digital a couple of years ago. So there was a sale on Comixology, and IDW had the rights, and re-released it. So of course I hadn't read it properly since I think I was about 12, and I read it a couple of years ago. I'm not going to lie, it's bad. It's really bad. I've got I hadn't seen the first issue, like the American version of the first issue before, but this is like the digital. It's on my iPad. It's a Bill Sienkiewicz cover, but it's almost like someone drew a version of what Optimus Prime looks like and went, it's something like that, Bill. Can you do that but painted? So he's got like stumpy hands. If you look at it properly, it's a weird cover. Like Gears is on it and he's half a car, half legs flying around. It's like, that's not...
From what I saw through the screen, I thought that the way it was sort of like painted like Bill Sienkiewicz, I'm like, that's kind of cool that he did a Transformers cover.
Don't look at it though,
because he does everything with his style.
Yeah, I think like I think Michael Golden did the cover of number 2. So they had some interesting artists on the covers for a little while, but it was the first 4 issues. It was only going to be a 4-issue mini, and for some reason, people wanted more, even though it was terrible. Like it's not good. It's very messily drawn, but I think like when they kind of go, oh, we're carrying on. Okay, so it's at the end of issue 4. This is obviously spoiler territory, but like no one's going to go, oh yeah, but what happens? Or maybe they will. I don't know. They all the Autobots and Decepticons are in a big scrap, and Shockwave comes down and just kills everybody, or shoots everybody because he's a massive gun from space, and he shoots everybody, and that's kind of like the end of the series. I think it was going to be like, oh, we beat the Decepticons, that's the end of the series, please go buy the toys now. When they realized it was selling, he comes down and he blasts everyone, and everyone's on the ground. It's just Shockwave stood there, who's the dude with the one eye, and it carries on for number 5, and then you've got the Autobots are basically all strung up, and Ratchet is the only one that wasn't shot, so he's the only Autobot that's still out there, and he's in the Savage Land, because at first it was set in the Marvel Universe. Nick Fury was in it. Spider-Man appears in issue 3, and then they went, oh, we better backtrack and just pretend it's not in the Marvel Universe. But it's a really... And every time they released toys, he had to throw... Bob Budiansky, who wrote it, had to throw in all these extra characters constantly. And we've got to do Pretenders now? What's that about? They're robots that have to dress up as aliens? Why? Like, because that's the gimmick this year. You know, and he ran with it. But it was pretty bad, but I've got a real soft spot for it. But in expansion to that, so the Marvel UK first issue cover is by Jerry Paris. Oh my God, look at that thing. Look at that cover, man. It's a thing of beauty. And I saw that in the shop, and I'm like, yeah, I think I want this comic, and now I've seen the cover, gimme. And that was it. This is what sold me on comics as a medium. But they ran Star Wars, the Marvel UK ran, Transformers as the main series. Then the backup was Machine Man. So you had old Machine Man stories in there. And then I think Power Pack were in there or something at one point. And they always ran a backup. But then because it would catch up with the American stories, Marvel UK would go, we've got a gap. We've got no Transformers stories, and this has to come out every fortnight or every week, it was at one point. So they basically got Simon Furman, an English guy, to write new stories that are set between those other stories. And they were way better. They were so cool. And at some point he introduced the whole Transformers the movie thing with the, you know, from the film. He made that part of the continuity. So it's not in the American continuity at all, but it's in the Marvel UK continuity. And Galvatron's traveling through time, and he's beating up all the modern day characters and stuff. And then they send a bounty hunter to catch Galvatron, and it's Death's Head. So that's where Death's Head comes from.
You love Death's Head.
I love Death's Head. Yeah. So like, this is a huge, and it went on for, I think I dropped it around about issue 250.
Wow.
that's how different it is here. Like you buy a weekly series, and it's chopped up into bits, and it's got backup stories in it, and you get a lot of comics. So yeah, it's kind of two things there. So it's kind of the American one. I did read it again. It's not great to the point of it being kind of outwardly awful. But there are moments because it's like bits of nostalgia. But the Marvel UK stories are the real thing. So like the license is floating at the minute for Transformers and G.I. Joe. I don't know if they're in talks with anyone, but Marvel keep buying up licenses at the moment, releasing the Omnis and then, dropping the license again. So maybe this is the answer. Maybe we'll get Transformers re-released in a proper omnibus format. And even though I know it's painfully bad, would I want that? It's such a big part of my childhood. Like it's massive. I love Transformers. I had how many did I have? 180 Transformers as a kid. I mean, I've got a Megatron.
Yeah,
I've got a Megatron now. I love Transformers. The IDW stuff is way better as well, because I was afraid to read it, and it turns out it's some of the best comics I've ever read. It's so good, like IDW's Transformers. But yeah,
gotta check that out.
Some of the writers, it's very. I've mentioned it a lot because I'm a sucker for it. But the world building in it is brilliant, and the writers that took it over were inspired by the Marvel UK stories, not the Marvel US stories from when they were a kid. So there's a big influence there.
Right, gotcha.
But it'd be good to see that again one day, reprinted, and I might actually get to see what happens in the end of the Marvel UK stories, because I never did.
It'll come back.
It'll come back.
Everything comes,
doesn't it?
They need the right movie to come out, they'll do it for sure. Very nice. That was fun. I like talking about those books that we love and hate, or in my case, read this. It's not that bad. You get real guilty pleasure. I always break the rules.
Even when it's your topic, you break the rules.
Yeah, always. So let's get into some business before we wrap up. We got some promotions to make sure we take care of. Dave, do you want to take it away?
Okay. So if you want to head over to... am I reading this? Absolutely. If you want to head over to the website, that's omniversecomics.guide for the latest reading orders, podcasts, videos. So we'll also be adding reviews soon, which is something that I'm working on behind the scenes with a few people are interested in contributing, people whose stuff we like, not naming any names, but I think at least one will be fairly obvious. And you can catch up with our social media on Instagram, Tumblr, Pinterest, Hive, and other places that we're constantly promoting ourselves on shamelessly. The video for this is available on Twitch for a week, but it will be permanent forever, all time on YouTube, probably towards the weekend. The podcast itself, so just the sound version, will be available on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, all the usual places, because you love it. And we'll be back next week for another Twitch episode at the same time, Wednesday, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time if you're from the New Yorks, or 5. What time is it? No, it's 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. This is where I get really confused. 5:30 Eastern Standard Time if you're on that side of the Atlantic. Probably a different time if you're in another part of the world. It's late here, so thanks if you're watching from the UK, because we've kept you up all night. But that's how I roll. You know what I mean?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Misha, for everything you guys do for putting the show together. Rate and review us on your podcast platforms, please. It makes a difference. On YouTube, subscribe. Press the subscribe button. It helps.
It does.
Spread the word.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Spread the word.
Dave, see you week with who knows?
Who knows? Sit beforehand, but...
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you for listening.